Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Bikes for Death podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I'm your host. And on today's episode, we are talking all things physical therapy with a real-life physical therapist. My guest today is Maria Osowski, who I met in Wausau, Wisconsin when I went up there for the Red Granite Grinder. She's actually been on the podcast before, episode 131, whenever we did a recap of that race. She was the winner of the 144-mile version of the Red Granite Grinder. And during that episode, I found out she was a physical therapist, and my podcasting senses started to tingle. And many months later, Maria joins us again, this time talking about how to keep yourself out of the physical therapist office. Maria is a lifelong athlete. She has done many different disciplines of athletics, and I thought she would be the perfect guest to really work us through many things: how to prevent injury, how to have a endurance body, how to maintain a level of overall fitness, and what to do if you do get injured, or how to even prevent injury on endurance efforts, long bikepacking trips, whatever it may be. And we talk about when you should consider seeing a physical therapist. So I don't know about you, but for me, being injured is one of the most difficult things to deal with. There's nothing that I want more than to be active, to be outdoors, and to be using my body. And when things hurt, it's less fun. And so I personally found this episode to be very informative and helpful. We actually recorded this one a little over a month ago. I've already started to put into practice a lot of the things that we talked about in today's episode, and I can vouch for their efficacy. I've already noticed improvements, and maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about that after the show. But for now, let's get into it. The format of today's episode is that she and I chat through a bunch of different topics, and then at the end, she demonstrates how to do some of the stretches and stuff that we discuss during the episode. So there is a component of this that would probably benefit from watching, and what I've done is put that available on the episode page at bikesfordeath.com. So if you just want to watch the section where she takes us through some demonstrations, I'm going to have that edited out so you can watch just that section. And I really hope with this episode that it's something that you can come back to many times, and it will help you ride your bike longer, further, and maybe even faster. Who knows? All right, well, let's get into today's episode. But first, let's take a moment to thank the people that made today's episode possible, starting with our latest batch of patrons. This week, we would like to thank Jon Rice, Christopher Throop, and Ryan Odell for signing up to be sustaining members of the Bikes for Death podcast. It really does take a village, and we can't do it without your help. If you enjoy these episodes and you would like to help me produce them, you can find out more over at patreon.com/bikes-or-death. As I mentioned in last week's episode, Bikes or Death has become my full-time job. And if you've been on the fence wondering when is the best time to sign up to be a patron, it might be now. And that's it. No ads on today's episode. Let's make it quick, easy, and get straight into my chat with Maria. Ladies and gentlemen, we're doing something new today. For the first time ever, we're going to be diving into the topic of how to keep yourself out of physical therapy with an expert, Maria here, who's joining us, who is actually a physical therapist, because I am not. I've got aches and pains, though, and I've been in pain before, so I know that side of it. But Maria, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being willing to share with the audience and share some of your expertise in the world of physical therapy and also athletics.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's fun to be here.
So before we get into the topic at hand, let's get to know you a little bit better and just kind of get into your background, because I know actually, for anyone, they may have listened to your episode. You were on the podcast previously whenever we did the Red Granite Grinder episode, the recap. So you were the 144 women's first place finalist or finisher. And I learned that you've had a long history in sports. And so do you want to kind of give a recap of some of your personal experience in athletics?
Sure. I guess I always grew up riding bicycles. My dad taught, so in the summer we were all home and we went everywhere on our bikes. We hardly ever got in the car. So it was a grocery store, the library. It was just kind of our mode of transportation. And so I just always enjoyed it, enjoyed being out on backcountry roads, no cars, no people. So it was always great to do that. Anyway, so just love riding. And since I've moved back home after college, it's really fun to get out on these roads that we used to ride as kids and, and explore new ones. So I had always ridden my bike. I got into triathlons when I was in college, did pretty well there. Never considered myself a great runner, although people tell me I'm a good runner. So I just run kind of because I have to sometimes. But then my former spouse was a racer, had always raced bicycles on the road, on the mountain. So I got into racing. And now it's kind of the only way I know how to ride in a sense. So it's a little bit of a crossroads now. It's like, because I love racing and I've done really well in the last couple of years. Well, at least considering I have 2 kids and a full-time job, I think I do well. So it's like, okay, well, do I keep racing? But we're going to take some bike packing trip this summer, which will be my first official, got to carry everything on my bike. I've backpacked and done that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, racing, I'm getting more into endurance riding and things like that. Did the Iron Bowl, ride fat bikes, ride gravel bikes, mountain bikes, all of it.
And you did the Berkey recently.
Yeah, we skied the Berkey again. Did the classic Berkey the last couple of years. I finished my 12th Berkey this year. So that's a lot of skiing. So we had a rough snow winter, but which is always disappointing. So I was a little less enthused with my finish this year as I was last year, but I still did very well and have an opportunity to ski out of the elite wave again. So that's always a good feeling. And then we had Fat Bike Berkey 2 weeks later, and I was able to win that one again this year. So that's 2 years in a row. So yeah.
I didn't know that. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I had another really great day riding some fast snow. So it's always fun.
What was your average speed? Do you remember? Because you're talking to a guy in Texas, 13.
Right? Yeah, it was over. Yeah. So, I mean, the top guys did it and, I wasn't too far behind them, but I had a good 5-minute gap on Sonia, and she's an awesome rider and, almost 9 minutes on third place. So I had a good ride.
That's
and
amazing.
Only crashed once.
How many miles is that one?
It's a 40K, so about 28 miles, and it's all on the Berkey Trail. So, the benefit for me is I love that trail. I ski it or ride it in the Schwamigan. We ride mountain bikes on it all year, and you ski it when those corners and the rise and the fall, it gets it's awesome. So yeah,
that's amazing. I didn't even realize you could average that high on fat bikes.
Well, when it's double track and they groom that trail for skiing all winter and it's rock fast, I mean, those, you fly. I mean, you just do, because it's like riding on pavement and there's no bumps. There are a few soft spots, but it's like brand new road. It's awesome.
I'm excited to hear that you're going to be taking on bike packing. I'm not surprised because, as we just heard and as I learned on the last episode, you have a wide range of interest, and especially in athletics. I mean, you kind of do and have done it all. And so, again, when I met you, you had won the 144 mile, which is a pretty good distance. So I bet you're going to be well suited for bike packing, long days on the saddle and all that.
I think so. And I think from an endurance standpoint, it's really good. I actually think my dad used to do some of it when he was in college, because he had all the gear, the panniers. And I recently asked him, Dad, do you have that bag that used to be on the front of your bike? He goes, I don't know what happened to that. And I was like, oh, shoot,
Oh,
that would have been
oh
awesome.
man. Could you
Original
imagine?
bike packing gear from like 1973. I think,
Right, right.
probably
I
don't.
love that you're saying that because what we're doing is not new. This stuff has been around and people have been doing it a long time. So
Yeah.
we might be reinventing the wheel here a little bit, but we've been doing it a long time. Well,
Yeah.
cool. So let's transition into your backpack your background in physical therapy. When did you get into it, and what is your area of expertise, and anything you want to share about
Yeah.
that?
Well, I mean, I always wanted to do athletic training because I wanted to work with athletes and young people. And then I met a physical therapist and decided, yeah, I think that's more of where I want to go and not just be. I mean, athletic trainers do phenomenal things, but they work a lot of nights and weekends, and I really didn't want to. So I decided to go into physical therapy, and so I've been out since 2008 because I'm getting old. And I've worked in outpatient orthopedics since that time, specializing in, we do a lot of post-surgical care, but just general pain, and prefer to treat, obviously extremities. Neck and back are not my favorites, but we get a pretty general population at our
Yeah.
clinic. So
Do you happen to see many like athletes coming in for prolonged injuries, overuse injuries, that kind of stuff?
yeah, we do. I mean, and some of it's just, well, I had this and now I have this. And, we see sometimes a lot of those compounding things, and we have to, find imbalances. We see a lot of people that are it's just hurt for a while. And we do see a lot of older individuals, Medicare age and things like that. But yeah, just the general population of I want to run. I've always run, but now it hurts to run, or I want to ride my bike. And so, other interests that I have is working through my running certification to be able to offer that to our area, as well as I'm hoping to go to a bike fit course, because one of the only shops that does it is in Point. And we have to obviously pair with a shop, but it would be nice to be able to take that portion of our rehab and look at, well, people are like, well, I want to be able to ride my bike. Okay, well, let's figure out why. Maybe it's your bike, it's not your body, or things like that, to be able to add that to our repertoire, as well as one of my coworkers does golf assessments and one of them does some hockey stuff. So try to keep
Yeah.
our clinic and our staff well balanced and engaged, because
Yeah.
treating total joints all the time is not fun.
And specialize, all those,
Yeah.
because all those are going to have different movements and different inflammation. Like I played tennis growing up, so you have tennis elbow that you might get and stuff.
Yeah.
So like having a specialist there, and that was actually one of the things I was curious about. Is I know you're not I didn't know this, but I thought you weren't a bike fitter. But I'm curious how bike fitting could possibly resolve some of these issues. And I don't know. Do you have any experience with that? Have you ever referred someone to a bike fitter, or have you ever seen?
Yeah, I have. I've had myself fit on my bikes, just kind of from an efficiency standpoint. Sometimes we see more people who are like, well, I have this bike and my knees don't bend the way they want to. So, or I can't lean over as far on my bike. So some of it is just, building it to help people do what they want to do. It's also looking, in the future to be like, what are some other services, cash-based things where maybe somebody's just interested in progressing into triathlons or getting into cycling, and is my bike, how can I make this bike work? I'm always hesitant when people are like, oh, I want to get into that. And it's like, well, how much do you spend? Because we all know we can spend a lot of money on bikes, but to start, do we have to? I did have a patient this winter. He was hilarious. We got talking about fat biking. And one day he comes in, he goes, I bought a fat bike and it's your fault. But I said,
Yes.
I'm okay with that. I'm glad.
You're doing the Lord's work. You're doing a good job. Yeah. Cardiac health, mental health. You just gave him a whole new perspective on life.
Yeah. So it's just, I feel like it's definitely just kind of not something, I mean, as much, I would love to do it all day, every day, to be honest. But, how can we tie that into what we do? We see a fair number of runners or people who want to get back into running, or even people I know that ride bikes and run. And they're like, oh, when I ride, this happens. And when I do this, it's like, just to have them have a little more of that fit knowledge and things like that. And like I said, obviously teaming with the local shops and things, because sometimes you need a new stem, or, things like that are helpful.
Yeah. I think that's a great idea. I hope maybe you can circle back around and will let me know whenever you get that all set up, and we'll help spread the word for you. Because I mean, that's it doesn't help you if you solve one problem and you have another problem over here. It makes a lot more sense if you can solve all the problems at one time and move on from that starting point, essentially.
Yeah, because we have a lot of people that love to ride bikes. They just maybe don't ride bikes like I ride bikes. But, people want to be able to ride 5 to 10 miles, and they get really excited about it. And, and it's always kind of funny when they're like, oh, I rode 10 miles and I've been doing it 3 days a week. And, well, how far did you ride? And I'm like, I did 50 last night. And they're like, what? So it's like, but everybody has their own victories and their own goals. And so the more I can equip myself to help people keep their active goals, and which is a lot of what this podcast is about right now today, is how do we keep being active? How do we help our bodies as our bodies age? Because frankly, our bodies are aging from the age 23 on. So how do we keep them aging well? Bodies that don't age well are in my clinic all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep our bodies happy so we can keep doing the things that we love to do, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious, you're an athlete, you're a physical therapist. We're going to be talking about a lot of things that we can do to maintain our bodies, as you said. Anecdotally, can you speak to your own experience, like with the tools that you have? Can you notice a difference? Like you have less aches, you have less pains, you recover faster. I don't know. You seem like the perfect person to ask, though.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have to practice what I preach. When I was, it's a little off subject, but it's really kind of funny. When I was growing up, and to this day, my mom is an adamant. She gets up every morning and she does some dynamic stretches and some static stretches. And when I was a kid, well, I got to do my stretches. And we all kind of like, okay, mom, and she's like, well, I got to do it. And then if I don't do it, I don't have a good day. Well, a few years ago, probably almost 10 years ago, I started using my foam roller every morning. And mom was right. You feel better. So I really try to stick with that. I'm like, if I'm going to expect people to do things to help them, I have to be consistent with mine. I can tell when I get tight, if I skip days. I use a lot of foam rolling and stretching and dynamic warm-ups and stuff before and after my bike rides, because I'm getting older too, and my body doesn't respond the same as it did 10 years ago. I try to keep up on my strength. That's actually one of my goals for this summer, is to be more consistent on a strength program. I mean, I do it and then we ride and you get busy and things like that. But I've definitely have the time and the capability to be more consistent there. So, the benefit of having the background that I do, and the resources that I do, it's like, oh, I'm getting a little sore, like today, I'm like, oh, my knee's a little sore. Well, I've ridden kind of 100 miles over the last 3 days and I didn't stretch great that one day or yesterday. So yeah, that's probably why it's a little sore. Sure enough, you stretch, it goes away. So it's definitely a benefit to having that, to keeping me riding and understanding my recovery and just being in tune with my body.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think that's a good segue. I think let's get into some of the meat and potatoes of today's topic. But before we do, just for the listener, the format of this show is we're going to be going through and talking about a lot of things that you can do in your daily life, some routines that you can get into. And then at the end of the episode, a lot of the things that we talk about today, Maria is actually going to do some demonstrations. So this podcast is available as a video format as well. So she's going to be talking through all that stuff, but if you'd like to watch it, I just want everybody to know that that's available, and that'll be at the end of the episode. And then Maria, I don't know if this is prudent or not. I've never done an episode like this, but do we need to offer any type of disclaimer so nobody sues your business or anything like that?
Well, maybe we should. I mean,
Doesn't hurt.
A lot of the information that the exercises and the stretching and things, I mean, you can find through a Google search. So I'm not presenting anything that's not already kind of out there in the world. But obviously, I mean, people need to do things within reason. If you know you've had a surgery and you have a precaution or there's something you're not supposed to do, well, you need to follow those. My job here isn't to diagnose, it's simply to offer advice and expertise. Nothing is absolute in life in general. So these are based off of recommendations. Obviously, if you have questions or concerns, if you know a therapist or you're scheduled with a therapist or your physician, you can always ask. These are things that I've found clinically, things that I've learned, things personally. And so it's nothing that I'm saying here is a be all end all and the only way to do things, because there's many different ways to do some of these similar things. So it's simply my advice, and I'd be more than willing to give people my contact information should they decide they have questions or concerns.
Oh, cool. Well, we'll put that in the show notes then, and a way to get in contact with you if they do. That was an amazing, I feel like you could have been an attorney. That was a great disclaimer. There's no way anyone could sue you. This is just for fun. It doesn't even... it's just for fun. It's entertainment.
Yes.
I don't know
entertainment and learning, but yes, nothing that can't be found elsewhere.
That's true. And I don't know anything, so don't listen to anything I say, and don't sue me. Perfect. Yeah. I'm just playing the guy that has aches and pains. So, all right. Well, now that we got the legal out of the way and my lawyers are happy, just kidding. I don't have a lawyer. As athletes, and I'm going to use athletes a little bit loosely for today's conversation, and I mean that like anyone who is an athlete to a weekend warrior. I mean, somebody who likes to go ride, go run. I mean, everybody listens to this podcast is going to be go riding, but people that do this kind of stuff, what should we or could we be doing to maintain a healthy body and prevent injury? Because that's really like you said at the beginning, the whole idea. How do we keep our body healthy and prevent injury?
I think the biggest thing is we have to keep moving in healthy ways. But how do we keep staying active? In the American Physical Therapy Association a couple of years ago, their saying of the year, it kind of makes me chuckle, but the saying is motion is lotion. And so if you move and the joints stay lubricated, we keep motion, we feel better. And everybody probably knows at least one individual who, as they age, moves less, which happens. We get older and it just takes, as our bodies change, it takes more energy. But as we move less, our joints become stiff, and perfectly healthy joints can be stiff. We lose water, we lose fluid in our joints, cartilage, things start to deteriorate. And so when we don't move, then it gets harder to move and our bodies just kind of tighten. I like to think of it as, you remember those penny things in the mall where you put a coin in and it's these nice big circles, and it goes around. But once it gets to that bottom, it gets really, really tight. And so it just kind of drops. And that's kind of, in a sense, the way our bodies kind of work is we move and we move, but as we stop moving, it gets harder to move. So we move less and we move less. And then we're kind of stuck in these positions where people who can't stand up straight because they've sat too long, or we fall because we're not able to lift our feet high enough to clear our toes when we walk because our calves are too tight. And so movement is key and healthy, safe, and that stretching, whether it's dynamic or static, and we'll kind of touch base on the difference there, is it's making us get out of those repetitive patterns. The other thing to keep in mind too, cycling is a repetitive pattern. And some people are like, well, I'm active and I'm gardening and I'm doing my housework and I'm doing this. And it's like, yes, that's all wonderful activities. You're definitely not a sedentary individual, but we tend to move in still repetitive patterns. If we're working, we're gardening, we're bending over, or we're doing yard work, we're bending over. So we're still putting ourselves in those crouched, hunched positions that we have to then open. I teach a lot of people just, how do we can't necessarily make huge changes. We have to make conscious changes to our posture, but how do we reverse what we do to ourselves all day? And myself included, I spend a lot of time holding arms or legs and bending forward. I have to take that time at the end of the day and just lay on the floor and stretch, to keep ourselves moving and to keep our joints healthy and balanced.
So you touched on it. What are, some of the different types of stretching? Let's talk about the different types of stretching.
So there's three main types of stretching: dynamic stretching, static stretching, and ballistic stretching. I'm going to start out with ballistic stretching, and purely because this is not really, or it's not an endorsed form of stretching anymore. It was kind of this, kind of bounce where you're kind of going in and out, you kind of get to the end and then you kind of adding extra force. And it's really not a good way to do any of our things. And there's no reason cyclists really need to perform this. It uses momentum and extra force, and it just can put too much damage to soft tissues and lead to excessive tearing or increased inflammation and actually reduced flexibility, over time. So anything where they say, oh, get down there and then bounce, it was a real thing, I think, in like the 70s and 80s, some of those, you just using force. It's just not, research has shown this is not going to give you the benefits that we are looking for, because stretching in general is meant to try to lengthen muscle units and allow them to be more relaxed. Muscles are kind of like chains in a sense. And so they all have these over the cross link, and they get cross links and get really, really tight. And so stretching is used to kind of fatigue those cross links to allow more elasticity. And so why is this important for our joints when we want our joints to move? Is, well, because if you think of like really tight rubber bands, it holds things really snug. So you have muscles and tendons, they cross a joint. And the tighter the rubber band, the tighter the joint is. So take your knee, for example, your muscles on the top and below are here, and we have this nice space. When it's too tight, the joints get tighter. So then they don't want to move as well because they're just too close together. And so we have to stretch and lengthen that tissue to allow more space and fluid so the joint is more comfortable to move.
Okay. And ballistic is not...
It's because it's like a jumping, kind of a pounding way of stretching.
It's not loosening up.
It's not beneficial at all. Don't do it.
Okay, good.
So the other big words, dynamic versus static. So dynamic means movement. Static means obviously that you're not moving. We use dynamic stretching with warm-ups, whether that's before a workout, before a heavy therapy session. In the summer, I do speed and agility clinics at one of the local high schools, and we always warm up with dynamic stretching. And so it's movements and moving through joints as much motion as we can to start raising the body temperature, get the blood flowing to the muscles, and preparing our bodies for the stress that we're going to put on them. It means doing a motion with one muscle to stretch the opposite muscle. So we can't, joints have muscles in the front and the back. Like take your elbow, for example, your bicep bends your elbow while your tricep straightens it. You can't use both at the same time. So we use dynamic stretches to kind of activate one muscle to the end range, which allows a stretch on one side, and then we reverse it as with the reverse motion. So we're trying to activate one to stretch the other. So we're not applying load, we're not using force, we're just using gentle range of motion. Like I said, it helps to warm up our bodies so we can incorporate things like balance and just different kind of things to prepare the muscles for movement, because a lot of times you can't just, and I'm sure people find sometimes you're like, oh, I'll just jump on my bike and go. And you jump off the couch and you get on your bike and it's like, oh, it just doesn't want to go, because we haven't started that blood flow. That's where a lot of times with running, they say, well, walk a little or do a light jog, warm your body up, get the blood flowing to your muscles to allow them to move better. And that's what dynamic stretching does.
Can we, I have a couple questions there. Yeah. So like you said, if you're going to transition into running, maybe walk first. And I'm guilty of this for sure. I often will warm up on my bike. I'll hop on, I'll soft pedal for 10, 15, 20 minutes. Is that sufficient? Is there benefits that I'm missing out on by not also stretching?
Well, it depends on what you qualify as like a soft pedal. Some people, I mean, if you can, that is going to help. Sometimes you get to like, if you get to a group ride and you've got like 5 minutes, you may not always have time to soft pedal, but doing a little bit of stretching after jumping out of the car. So, I mean, things like, just side to side leg swings, heel toe walking, high knee walking, anything like that. Sometimes people do mini lunges, even just standing marches, just trying to move. So, I mean, a soft pedal is, I mean, you're definitely going into cycling. So that is going to help you kind of warm up and do things like that. But then say you do a little warm up and then you're at a group ride and you got to sit for 5 minutes. Well, that's a great time to do a little bit more static stuff. But yes, a soft pedal. But there again, it depends too on what people need for their own bodies as well. Sometimes people can just jump on and go and with or soft pedal and things. But we're kind of, it's like thinking, okay, you just crawled out of your tent, you set up camp. Now, okay, how are we going to, what other kind of things do we want to go? So that does play a part.
Okay.
But
one area that I feel like I started strength training really consistently, like I guess about 9 or 10 months ago. And I've been hit or miss with my warm-ups. I know, on paper that I'm supposed to be doing them. But, honestly, like if I'm just in a rush, I'll skip my 10, 15 minute warm up and I'll go straight into lifting weights. And that's an area where I feel like I'm guessing stretching is probably even more important. And so maybe you can talk to that.
So you're hitting, Patrick, on one of my soapboxes in general for athletics is that I help with the local softball teams and the basketball teams and things. And it always gets eliminated. Like if somebody's like, I got an hour and a half, what is the one thing? Oh, just stretch on your own at home. That's what happens. And so it really takes a dedicated coach and things because it is important. Because when I see kids in the clinic or individuals, they're like, well, yeah, I know I should stretch. Okay. That's like me saying, I know I shouldn't eat this donut. It's the same kind of thing. We know we're going to do it, but it's how do we make that conscious decision to do it? Because it is so important. And when people, I see people and those first couple sessions for me personally as a therapist in how I practice, I don't jump into strengthening. I make sure people have a good handle on their stretches and that's routine because we have to create that motion we want to lift. And especially with lifting, you should do a little bit of warm up, just even if it's just arm swings, leg swings, like I said, it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but just get the blood flowing. You'll find that you may be get more benefit from your lifting because you're not wasting those first few repetitions trying to pump blood to your muscles because you've already done that. That's why it's in there. It's on the paper. Do what the paper says.
Yes, ma'am. And the other thing that I've experienced, and I think that, I've experienced injury. I've experienced overuse injury and probably lifting too much too soon and not warming up enough. And so I think that's what I'm excited, and we'll get into, I guess, some breaking down some of what those actual stretches are, what they look like, because I watch a lot of YouTube videos on how to do this exercise correctly, how to do this workout correctly, but I don't watch a lot of stretching videos, and it isn't like, something, but I do acknowledge it's important, and I'm going to use this episode as a jumping off point to do better.
Yeah, and it is because it's, so let's, if we go into static stretching, which it's that post-workout stretch and really clinically, we find we should hold stretches for 30 to 60 seconds, which for some people is like, oh, it's a long time. And so it's not exciting to stretch, but I encourage people to use it as that cool down. It helps, calm your heart rate down. Other things, work on those motions and things like that, because you think you're lifting and you're shortening and shortening and shortening, trying to build that strength. But you stretch and you can help keep that, that fluid moving. It allows the blood flow to flow to areas that were restricted before, delivering nutrients, oxygen. It helps remove that metabolic waste. Stretching and foam rolling after exercise can really help prevent that buildup of lactic acid. I mean, that's going to happen. But if we just, you work out or you ride your bike and then you sit, and you're stiff when you get up, that's because all of that fluid and everything that you've created from your workout is settling into the muscles. And then we get more muscle soreness, so like the next day it's like, oh my gosh, I lifted too much. Well, you're not going to have that feeling as much if you can really work to prevent that fluid from building, because if we don't move the fluid, that's when we get cramping, that's when we get inflammation, and then therefore pain. I also, like I said, it's a relaxation in a sense. Say you get off a hard ride, or like if I get off my trainer, and sometimes it's good to think and take that time to kind of reflect on, well, how did my ride go? How does my body feel? Could I have done this better? Or could I have, some of it is just a mental break as well, and it gives you that little bit of a moment to calm your heart rate down and just get your system relaxed. And here too, it doesn't need to take a lot of time, but it will really help with soreness and just overall maintain mobility.
So you said time there, and that's one of my questions. So it's, my perfect routine is that I'll warm up for 10, 15 minutes, sometimes 20 minutes. Sometimes I really will warm up, I promise, but I'm not as consistent as I would like to be. And then I'll work out for an hour. And then what I do is I like turn on the steam in the shower, like only hot, and I'll go in my like shower area, and I do like up to 20, 30 minutes of stretching. And what you said hit the nail on the head for me. Like it's meditative, it's relaxing. That's like some me time, like I'm just in the shower stretching and I'm reflecting and maybe getting my mind ready for what I'm going to do that day or whatever it is. I think that's super important. So if I understand correctly, you should be stretching before and after your workouts.
Well, a little bit of that, what we call that dynamic, that stretching through movement, and then the static. So because sometimes if we go and I'm going to go touch my toes, I just got up off the chair and I'm going to just jump right into an aggressive stretch. Sometimes if the muscles are really tight, the recoil after you come back doesn't really gain us the muscle length change that we're trying to see. And so we kind of use those active stretches as a warm up, and then the more slow, like you say, the relaxing, longer holds. I know there's a lot of different things out there online, get a hold 20 seconds, 10 seconds. Research, the most, what we teach in a lot of schools and things like that is, and personally too, that 30 to 60 seconds, really allowing your body to relax into a stretch. A stretch shouldn't be something as hard as you can go for 10 seconds, because the muscle is just like a rubber band. It's just going to recoil right back. So we keep it really kind of low load. And especially for people that are relatively new to stretching. I see this in the clinic. If you take a scale, kind of like your pain scale, 0 is nothing, 10 is the worst. Like I can't hold this stretch. We want to keep it down at the bottom around a 2 or 3, maybe a 4. I always tell people just kind of sit, and then, okay, you start to feel it. And then, it gets better, because over time we're seeing that lengthening, and then we can add a little bit more. So in that 30 to 60 seconds, you may actually be moving as you're gaining length on that muscle, but that low load, long time to just fatigue the muscle units to get them to lengthen.
Now, what about so we're stretching, what about how long does it matter, what we're targeting? And, so you said, hold the static for 20, 30 seconds, something like that. But how many different static stretches essentially should we be doing, or about, do they recommend that you stretch for 10, 20 minutes a day? Is there any kind of guideline with that?
Some of that is that I don't, I try to hit the big muscle, your big target groups. Not everybody has a ton of time. And so for me, like clinically, I try to pick the most relevant things to people kind of for what I'm treating them for, or what is most beneficial. And your big kind of goes for the general population, low back, getting that and keeping that movement. We have so much movement and it takes a lot of stress. Our backs do a lot. Our glutes, and some of those gluteal posterior hip muscles, our hip flexors are on the front side in through our pelvis and the top part of our quads. kind of keeping you kind of going at that core, and then obviously hamstrings, calves, lower extremity kind of stuff. And the ones that we'll kind of go through, I've got a couple that can hit on a lot of different areas. And so those are kind of, because honestly, people, I would love to, myself included, love to stretch for 20 minutes, but I usually give myself about 10. So it's like, what is the big, so kind of hitting some of those major big muscle groups, but also there's a way to pick stretches that incorporate numerous areas.
And would you like rotate stretches? I mean, if you got on a routine, just like you're doing, push, pull muscles and leg muscles, do you also kind of circulate your stretches so you're targeting different areas? Or is it just based on need?
I think some of it is need, but on like for people trying to say, what should I do on a daily basis? You really kind of can hit these big areas, and you can hit them every day. You can hit them twice a day. Stretching is different. It's not meant to be fatiguing. It's really not meant to make you sore. So that's one thing too. If people say, well, I stretch, and I get this in the clinic, I stretch, but I hurt after I stretch. I'm like, well, then that's when we're looking at, that's where I talk about, like, I've transitioned to more of that low load, longer time frame. So we're not getting to that point where like, oh my gosh, I go as hard as I possibly can, and then I just hurt afterwards. Stretching should not hurt when you're done. You should actually feel a little bit better. And then if it does, then we got to kind of delve in a little bit more into, is it hydration? Water. We're not going to talk about hydration here, but I want to put my plug in for water. It's huge to keep your bodies hydrated, because if you're not getting enough water, your muscles are not going to respond to stretching and strength the way we want them to. And stretching can be more uncomfortable. We're going to get more cramping when we don't, when we have tight muscles and not enough water. And so it's huge to make sure you keep your bodies hydrated as well.
Yeah, it turns out water is good for us.
Yeah, I don't know.
The science just keeps coming out on water.
For many, many different things. And I know this sounds a little gross, but I always tell people, because it's like, people are like, I got to drink 8 cups of water a day. I'm like, well, probably more like 10, but yes. And so, I work with a lot of population where water was never pushed. Somebody in their 80s, I had an older gentleman, I said, you got to drink 8 cups of water. And he looked at me like, that's a lot of water. And I go, I drink 4 Nalgene's of water a day. And, that's how I know my body stays healthy. And so I always tell people, you got to check your pee. It's really the best and easiest way to make sure that you're hydrated. It should be pale yellow or clear. If it's dark yellow, or, obviously vitamins do change. My vitamins change that as well. Yeah. But for the most part, people, that's the easiest way. And it's all of this that we're talking about today is going to feel even better if we're hydrated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway.
So what was that?
My side note, sorry.
Oh, no. We'll take it. We'll do tangents here. We already gave our disclaimers, so we can say whatever we want now.
All right, we're good.
I had one more question on stretching.
Perfect.
Yoga. I know a lot of people are really big into yoga. It's something I've recently tried I've dabbled. Anyway, I was curious, how does yoga fit into stretching? Does that satisfy that requirement, or would stretching actually be different? And
I think people that do yoga, because the yoga, people that practice yoga, or there's Tai Chi, there's Qigong, there's so many different aspects. Tai Chi is actually one of my favorites, because it's it's all dynamic tasks. I know it sounds goofy, but it's actually.
I used to practice Tai Chi.
Yeah.
I've read about Eastern religions, and I would do Tai Chi at sunrise and sunset every single day. And actually it was amazing. It's a great habit to be in. But anyway, sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But yeah, there's so many. A good yoga instructor is really, or Pilates. All of those kind of things are good at adapting things to get to people's, or being with what people are able to do. And so, yes, I think that people that can practice yoga every day, yes, that definitely fulfills some stretching and things like that. And a lot of that is is based, I mean, it's just based off movement and breathing, and it's that relaxing. And when we talk about like post workout, that meditative, how was my workout? Well, that's yoga. And so, for somebody to say, well, I do yoga every day, but now I have to stretch too. It's like, well, no, I mean, they're very similar, but yoga tends to be kind of that dynamic movement into a static. But you'll find too, when you do yoga, my limited experience with yoga, I will say limited. I'm not a very patient person. So sometimes taking a half hour to just sit there is really hard for me. But when I have done it, it's, even there, they don't just jump in and they don't tell you, well, go as hard as you can. It's all this low load, longer holds, trying to increase that and using our breathing in those techniques. So yeah. Can be very beneficial.
All right. So the other aspect here is strength training, that we've touched on. And I think, obviously it depends on our goals, but maybe we could tailor this conversation towards just an overall healthy body for an athlete, help avoid injury. Maybe you could talk about the importance of strength training, the role that it plays.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I definitely, one of my limits has been in being consistent. I can get strength once or twice a week, but my goal this summer is to do it a little more often, because strength just helps us obviously support our joints. Stronger bodies do help reduce joint pain and arthritis. There's a lot of research out about arthritis and how do we, kind of prolong surgery. And while it's maintaining strong bones, strong muscles, and flexibility, light strength training also helps build up that bone mass to help keep our bones strong. Obviously there's genetically, some people there's always factors that lead to bone health. But what we find consistency is that strength training at any age is beneficial to bone health, bone healing, and things like that. So loads, we don't, people think, oh, I got to go to the gym. I gotta get this membership and I don't want to lift heavy weights. Well, you don't necessarily need to. I do have a gym membership, but I use it because I swim. So I swim in the pool. I've never actually spent time in the weight room because I prefer to work more with, I also work in a clinic where we have a gym, so we can do stuff there, but you don't need a lot of equipment. It's just finding those things to incorporate balance and stability. And again, targeting our core, targeting the leg and the muscles we use a lot of, especially in cycling. I think cycling coach is going to tell you, you got to have core strength. You got to be able to move your hips with the bike and yet still maintain your upper body. You got to be able to, the bike, you're in a muddy spot and all of a sudden the bike is sliding down this rut. Well, how do you not fall off? How do you maintain control to stay there? That's core stability. And so, how do we incorporate that into what we do? It puts a different load on. We want to have good form, good technique, and things like that, to just be able to handle that constant pedaling. Pedaling, you think a bikepacking trip or 144 miles. I can't even tell. You could probably figure it out, but how many times do you turn a pedal crank in 144 miles?
Yeah, no clue. A lot.
So, here's the other thought too. People go in and we're like, well, do I have to do 1 rep maxes? Well, we're not looking for that power, that explosion. We're not jumping and counting how high we can jump. We are looking for endurance. So I would recommend, as far as exercises, looking at higher reps and lower weight. And that's where we can do body weight, do 30 to 40 reps and kind of cycle through things. The big thing right now is with the boot camps and the high intensity training. And that can be very beneficial. When people are like, well, I only have a half hour, how can I target my heart rate, my cardio, and my strength? Well, that's where that high intensity kind of 60 seconds on, break, 60 seconds can help. But do we all need to be benching 65 pounds and squatting 150 or whatever? I don't know what people squat, but how do we incorporate that into keeping our bodies to be able to handle a long load? Cycling is also unilateral in a sense. Yes, we're pedaling with both, but they're not pedaling at the same time. So some of the strength exercises we'll go through incorporate a lot of single leg activities because biking is essentially a single leg activity. So it's good to do double legs, but the single leg tasks are good for that, just that over and over opposite pedal stroke and things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I never thought about, I've never done that. I can't think of a time I've ever done single leg. I guess lunges and reverse lunges are kind of, but I'm still not isolating that leg. And so
right.
That's something that I need to incorporate.
Yeah. So hopefully I pulled in a couple different ones and things that, from cycling, but also from running and things like that. My youngest sister's an ultra runner, and she will often post, and we talk workouts and stuff. And most of her strength is all single leg, because you're running up a mountain, you're not hopping. You're not jumping. Everything is single leg. And so a lot of that kind of stuff is fast footwork, but it's, incorporating. And it also, single leg is hard because it takes more stability. It takes more balance. It takes more core control. Right. So we have to incorporate all of those things, and we can pick a few good exercises to really kind of target that whole lower extremity.
Yeah. I'm wondering, not only for fitness with, stretching and strength training, being in good shape, but do you have any information on how beneficial it is from a recovery standpoint to essentially start off in a good, with a good, healthy, fit body?
Well, yes. We always, when we look at getting into activity, in an ideal world, from, if I could, we would do an assessment and say, hey, these are areas you need to target. But that doesn't happen, so it's that gradual kind of, how do we prepare? How do we get ready? Of somebody who's say, well, I ride my bike, ride it for 10, 12, 15 miles, but I want to do that 60-mile ride with my friends this summer. So how do we prepare for that? Well, from a cycling or a training standpoint, well, you go out and you ride, and then you ride, okay, I did 12 miles. I feel good. Maybe the next time you do 15, and that slowly gradual add up. The same kind of thing with strength training. You can go out and spend an hour and, I feel great. So I did this. And then the next 2 days you walk around, I can't move, kind of thing. So, I always have people start without weight, and that's where body weight exercises come in handy, because we're lifting our body weight every time we stand up, sit down, and go up and down the stairs. So our bodies already have a certain amount of innate strength in them. And so how do we just challenge that a little bit more, but, not going gung ho all out right away. We have to, just like our cycling, we have to kind of gradually add that up. Typically with the strength, like you kind of touched on before, is we don't like to do it every single day. It's good to do a workout and then take a day off, or 2 days if your body's still sore. Strength training, if people can target to go 3 days a week, that's great. Or it's like, well, I can't do an hour. Okay. Or I can't do 10 exercises. Okay. Well, let's do 5 one day and 5 the next. So we're doing little bits, smaller workouts, but consistent.
Yeah.
Over a week. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I'm wondering, if we could even break down, so just if we as athletes and cyclists want to have and maintain a healthy body outside of riding bikes and doing our bike training, can you give an outline of maybe what you would recommend from, stretching every day, working out 3 times a week, 5 times a week? Is there a baseline or something people could target and shoot towards?
Well, kind of like I touched on before, stretching is a good thing to do every day, because like I said, too, whether we're cycling every day or walking, no matter what we're doing, we're still in patterns. I sit at a desk all day. How do we reverse and just keep our bodies moving? So stretching is always something that's really great to do. Like I said, with the strength training, trying to add that in. If you have a hard bike day, you're like, I got to go 50 miles, maybe not a day to do your strength training. Kind of keep your strength to either you're off the bike or days on a shorter ride if you like to ride every day, and try not to compound it with, heavy bike load. Keep it on maybe not even the day before, maybe 2 days before or the day after. You kind of have to, I guess, too, you have to listen to what your body says, because every body is going to respond a little bit differently. What works for me or what works for you may not work for the third person over here. So it's good to, try to be consistent. That's key. And some days it's just like, nope, my body says I just got to take a day off. And maybe I'm just going to walk and stretch today, or maybe, I'm really sore, I got to add my stretches in twice a day. So stretching each day, strength training 3 days a week is good, if not more. 4, but there again, adding in that rest day based on your schedule, and cycling in there too, listening to what your body says. And, but like I said, this last week, I haven't been on my bike a ton in the last couple of months because it's mud season up here. So the roads are questionable. The trails are a mess, but, rode the last 3 days, and it's like, oh yeah, I should probably take a day off, because the last time I rode 3 days in a row was probably last fall, so but that's just with me and my skiing. I ride the trainer through the winter, but not nearly as frequently as people who only cycle. So, that's part of it. Just like we would, I'm not a cycling coach by any means. I go based on what I know and what research has or what other programs have followed. But most most programs for any sport incorporate strength training throughout the week, stretching regularly, and then alternating those heavy and light workouts for your specific sport. Does that kind of make sense?
Speaking of how your body feels and listening to your body, like you, it turns out I'm getting older, and I'm wondering how age has an impact in this conversation. Does it become more important to exercise or, work out and stretch regularly? Is it always important? Like, how does age factor in this equation?
Well, like I said, stretching can always be important. And you talk to any high level cyclists, or even like these racers on the tour. Well, they have massage therapists, and they stretch, and they know that's part of their recovery, even at a high level at a young age. So yeah, like I said earlier, as we get older, we lose fluid in our bodies. And so that's where too, we see changes in disc height. That's how we get shorter as we get older. Muscles, we lose that elasticity ability, or the collagen in our skin changes, which makes our skin wrinkle. So fluids and healthy diet all help. So again, we want to maintain the motion we have. We want to maintain our bone health. We want strong bones and things like that. And we can definitely slow that arthritic process to an extent. We can, or help, even if it happens at a certain rate, we can help our joints feel better by keeping things stretched out, because our tissues get harder to stretch as we get older because of that loss of fluid.
Yeah. As I've started this new fitness routine, or whatever you want to call it, I'm definitely starting to notice my age as well, because I've been in the gym before at an earlier stage in my life, but since I've started up this time, and it actually speaks to something else you talked about starting slow and really building up. Well, I'm a dumb guy, and of course I get in there and I'm trying to lift everything and as hard as I can, and grunting and whatever. And I've caused myself some really aggravating injuries. I messed up something right here doing arm curls, and it took me legitimately 3 months before it was healed. And right now my left shoulder is just barking at me. And I'm realizing two things. A few things. I'm getting older, and as I get older, I think my body is feeling the impact of what I'm doing. I have aches and pains that I didn't used to. And so I don't know, for me, I feel like, the stuff you're talking about, I'm going to really take to heart, because one of the most frustrating things for me is having an injury. I don't want to be sidelined. If you're working up to a goal and you're being consistent, as you said, and you're doing good, and then you have an injury, well, now you got to take a week off, or 2 weeks off, or a month off. Well, that's a huge bummer. That's a reset, In
a sense, yes, it is. And because our bodies respond differently as we get older, and they don't respond as quickly. We don't, just the physiology behind our bodies change. And so, yeah. So sometimes even if you miss a week in the gym at say 40 is much different than missing a week in the gym at 30. But we also have to remember when we jump back into the gym, when you say, oh, I haven't been here in 10 years. Well, that's true. So you can't start where you left off, and so that's sometimes the hard part, why is the most common age group for rotator cuff tears men 40 to 60 years old? Because they think they're still as strong. And I don't mean any offense to any men in this age group, because you may feel like you're strong, but when I can do this on the weekend. Well, yes, the weekend, there's 5 days in between the weekends. What did you do in that 5 days to keep your body to be able to lift that 50 pounds of dog food or whatever, pull out a dock, by yourself? That's not always something, but you've touched also on something that makes sometimes what I do very difficult. It's that changing of that mindset of people who, well, I know how to lift and this is how I lift. And well, now we're finding the way we lifted is giving us pain. So now what? And that's where like physical therapists, if excellent therapists, that's their job, to help you figure out, how do we keep you doing this? How do we, what's going on? And what do we do that maybe we need to change so that you can get back to there? But yeah, changing mindsets on people can be very difficult.
So in my, let's use me as a case study. I'll use this as a free physical therapy appointment and hopefully other people. But so like in my case, I mean, I have an overuse injury. I went too hard. I didn't warm up. I did all the things wrong. I'm too old. I messed up in every way. I'm all the things. I'm your worst enemy. I'm your worst client. Hopefully not really, but
no, I don't think you would be my worst client.
But I mean,
pleasant to talk to anyway.
Oh, thanks. My strategy right now is, essentially rest it. Whenever I get, this is a push exercise that's aggravating this, start very, very low. I mean, I have as low as like 10-pound, dumbbells that I'll do like dumbbell presses with or something to really like start low. And so my thought is like essentially rest, start low, try to work back up. And then if I can't resolve the issue, if that doesn't resolve the issue, maybe like then would be a good time for me to go see a physical therapist. So I don't know, use that as a case study.
Yeah.
Does that hold water?
Yeah. So, I mean, yes, we have to rest. The term that I prefer to use over rest, because if you tell somebody to rest, it's like, well, then they don't do anything. Okay. So you take 2 weeks off and then you want to jump back into it. I like the term relative rest. And so what that means is, yes, I'm resting from things that are painful, but I'm still doing something. So maybe I can't lift 10 pounds, but okay, I'm just going to back off my weight a little bit. And if I can back off the weight and it doesn't hurt and I'm still able to kind of work through. So we're still challenging the muscles, not to the same extent, but they're still getting stressed, but they're pain free. So they're resting because they're not taking the same load, but we can still keep you active. You need to, kind of stretch. You think, okay, so a dumbbell press. Okay, well, that works a lot of your pecs and things like that. So maybe you're getting really strong here and it's kind of rotating forward. So then, you're getting some impingement back here. Well, we need to stretch the front and then strengthen and focus more on the lower part of your shoulder blade to kind of create that balance. So joints are essentially teeter-totters. And when one side is up, the other side, then we can have problems. So we're really tight and rounded here. We need that strength and stability, but we have to create the motion first, and then we have to strengthen. So sometimes we have to change our routine a little bit, but you're like, oh, I still want to do my press. Okay, well, do your press, but do it with what's pain-free. Yeah. And then also it may be too limiting motion. So I like to do, obviously, and we're not really to recommend medications and things like that. So that's always a tough conversation with people. I always tell people, well, you could do this, but I'm not going to tell you to take an anti-inflammatory. I have them kind of, rest as you need and then we'd get more into the conversation of when is it sore? When does it hurt? Tell me, there's anyone that's, a good physical therapist is really going to delve into what you're doing. And so if you get to that point where, okay, I rested, I'm working back, but it's still there. It doesn't mean you need to be in 6-8 weeks of therapy. Sometimes it's just someone to kind of go through and be like, okay, XYZ, these are the things you should do, and then go from there. Sometimes I see people 2 or 3 times and they're like, oh, nope, I got this. I'm better, and it's good to go. Sometimes it's just asking the questions and knowing, having someone to go to. So you do a little rest, you do a little work in that rest period, as long as it's pain-free, let your body recover. Ice, we can talk a little bit too about ice and heat, and the differences there, and gradually add back into that activity. But again, the key is we have to stretch.
I do want to talk about ice and heat. I had another question though, real quick.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about the relationship between your muscles and your joints and your tendons, and like, are you, it feels like to me, again, I'm the dummy, so I'll play the dummy and you can play the person that knows what they're talking about. But it feels like to me, like when I'm working out, what I'm trying to do is build muscle that like supports my joints and my tendons without overusing and stressing out all of those joints and tendons. That's just I don't know. Does that hold water?
Yeah. So, because so a tendon connects a muscle to bone. And so tendons are typically the parts that cross the joint. The length is often created in the muscles. Tendons don't always change, but a lot of the inflammation and that pain with overuse is felt more at the muscle, or at the tendon, because of the dysfunction in the muscle. Does that make sense so far?
It does. But what is a dysfunction in the muscle like?
So I don't like to tell people that they're weak, but it can be like a trigger point, so an overcrossing of the function or of the muscle units can inhibit normal function. So therefore dysfunction. I try to find ways to explain things that aren't, like detrimental to people. Like if you were to come in and you're like, well, I'm in the weight room and I'm going to do this. And I'm like, oh, you're just weak. How does that make you feel? You're like, no, I'm not. I'm not weak. Right. So you're right. Because you're not.
And then
weak.
I'm going to prove you wrong. Right. And then I'm going to do damage, but I can't tell you.
But then people have already created that thought like, well, this person told me I'm weak, but I do X, Y, and Z. So I try to use the muscle. The muscle is just not functioning properly. Is it because it's overly crossed, just because it's too tight? Or is it because it's unstable, or just it needs a little more re-education? Because what they've found too is when we get those trigger points in muscles is that the neuromuscular connection, there's actually like less chemical crossing between what we call where the nerve and muscle meet, the neuromuscular junction. And so, we have to kind of, by resetting that trigger point and then stretching through there, because when we don't get as much signal, the muscle isn't going to act as strong. So you may have all the motor units, but they're not firing the way we want them to. And so I use a lot of, we have to kind of get that muscle to function normally again. And so like think of, say, like your hamstrings, you get too much crossing. So the muscle got shorter. Well, you don't necessarily always feel it in the muscle belly, but you feel it, well, oh my gosh, the outside of my knee or the inside of my knee, because the tendon is now pulling those bones closer together because the muscle is pulling back further up the leg. And so we have to address that muscle to relieve the tension at the tendon and then therefore relieve the joint pain.
I know the answer. The what is it? The leg bone connected to the knee bone. The knee bone's connected. Yeah.
It is,
it's all connected.
And that's where a lot of our cycling muscles, so our big, your glutes, your hamstrings, your quads, all of your deep hip flexors, a lot of those muscles are what we call two joint muscles. So they're connected, they function at the hip and the knee. And so when we look at these stretches, we can get a lot of joint motion from these big muscles. And so when a muscle crosses two joints, well, then it gets a little more complicated, and kind of where the pain can be. Is it bursitis at my hip, or is it IT band at my knee? And, they're very similar. And so that's where too, it's like, well, I have this chronic kind of naggy knee pain, to see what, and it may just be, well, because you're weak on this side and you're tight on the inside of your, and so it's just our job is to find balance.
Yeah.
In the joints.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about hot and cold. I use both. I'll do like a steam shower and stretch after my exercises, like I said. And then I often I iced my shoulder last night whenever I was having this lower bicep issue. I iced it every single night, but I have no idea if that was the right thing. It's just what I did. So Yeah. What's the
Yeah.
deal with hot and cold?
Yeah. So the deal with hot is cold is there's no black and white with hot and cold, in my opinion. So we'll kind of break it down based on like injury. Because a lot of times people like football players, they sit in the ice bath and that kind of helps all the kind of pump some of that cold, constricts the blood vessels and things like that. I personally don't know that I'd be comfortable submerging myself in an ice cold bath, but
I have no desire to do that. I know it's like
so
super popular right now, but like,
yeah,
no,
I
I'm not
mean, and
interested.
right. And it can help. I mean, because it kind of restricts everything and it doesn't allow too much of that lactic acid. But like you said, with that steam and that heat and relaxing, I mean, heat definitely, it increases blood flow to the area. And so I'll use people because, people will say, well, no heat post-surgical, only ice, only ice. Well, sometimes people's hamstrings are so tight that I'll be like, well, just put some heat on it because we have to get them to relax in order to stretch and then the pain goes away. So if we're trying to use it as a relaxation type thing, I mean, yes, then heat is going to be helpful because heat increases blood flow, dilates all your blood vessels, helps everything relax, whereas ice tends to constrict things. Well, not tends, it does constrict your vessels. And kind of limit the blood flow, but it also helps reduce inflammation. So if you're out doing a lot of stuff, using a lot of joints, taking a lot of hits in a football game per se, there's a lot of inflammation that there's a lot of damage to your body. And so that's where then that ice bath kind of helps just kind of keep all that inflammation from building up. So if we break it down from like an injury standpoint, and we have acute injuries. So sudden onset, 3 to 7 days out, or I just got back from the gym and, oh man, my tennis elbow's really kicking up and it didn't hurt before. That's when we want to use ice. So like you say, after a workout, that quick, just to kind of help control that inflammation that we've created from what we've done from our injury, because that inflammatory response is very normal. And so it also helps us kind of maintain the blood and control pain. And so that's where that ice compression and elevation and rest are kind of helpful. So yeah, if you look at it, well, I didn't have any shoulder pain before I went in the gym and then I lifted and wow, now it's, kind of aggravated and things. That's when we want to put that ice on. That's an acute, that's a right now, it's inflamed. I mean, you could maybe say, well, yeah, I'll just leave it. Well, then you might wake up in the morning pretty darn sore because you let that inflammation sit. When we have inflammation in a joint or in an injury, we have loss of movement and more pain. So yes, that would be a good time to use that. I typically, I mean, like I said, if you're stretching and you're not having aches and pains, yes, then the steam bath for the heat isn't, you're not having an injury. You're just using the heat to help you relax. That's fine. Because some people don't tolerate cold. Heat is usually more comfortable for people. So yeah. That's an acute injury. Then we get into subacute, which is 1 week to about a month out, where it's like, oh, it still kind of hurts. It's better at times, not better. That's where it gets a little more dicey about what is best. And unfortunately, the research is we kind of don't always know. I usually kind of recommend to people, whatever you need. If you did a hard workout and yep, it's a little irritated, I can tell I did it. Put some ice on 20 minutes immediately. And then go on. Or if it's, you can sometimes two people like with muscle strains or sprain or like tears, we get a lot of bruising and it will alternate the heat and the ice at that subacute stage. Start with the heat and then a minute of ice, 2 minutes of heat, or, there's different ways to break it down. Or contrast baths is also what it's called, used in a lot of hand and foot things. But what that does is then that creates the dilation, the opening of the blood vessels, and then the constricting. So it kind of creates a pump to help move some of that bruising and that damage out of the tissues. Heat can help with more effective stretching, and then ice after workouts for that post-exercise soreness. And then we have chronic injuries. These are the greater than 6 weeks, your overuse, I do it over time injuries, and it's just not any better. Here, I let people kind of do what feels good, because same kind of thing. Sometimes it's like, well, it's really sore right now. The ice can help. And sometimes it's like, well, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, well, then maybe we need to heat the muscle. So it can be very difficult in that chronic stage when people are like, well, it's still just painful. Sometimes that's where therapy can come in and look at some of that imbalance, but also kind of help in different techniques that we use to restart that inflammatory response to, because over time that healing process slows. And so therapy can help kind of make sure it's staying on the right track.
Yeah. Well, as with anything that's underlying with anything medical, I feel like, everybody's body's different, like you said, and what everybody needs is going to be different. And so it makes a lot of sense.
And I just wouldn't recommend to people that they just wait and it'll go away. It'll go away because unfortunately, as we do get older, it doesn't go away as fast. And the longer we wait for it to go away, it may just be making the problem worse and make it take longer for it to go away.
Yeah. So with that being said, like, when would you recommend that somebody seek out a physical therapist? When is the right time to pick up a phone and make a call?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, if a lot of people have a therapist that they've seen. I mean, I have people that I've seen numerous times, and sometimes they're just like, "Oh, what do you think?" And if it's somebody I've seen and I've kind of seen him for that similar injury, it's kind of usually easier to do that. But it's like, okay, if it's been 6 weeks or even a month, it gets kind of towards that month, and if there's no change, then you should go see somebody. If you tried, a lot of people try, okay, I tried ice, I tried ibuprofen. The longer you wait, the longer it's going to take for it to recover, so you don't want to miss out on a summer of riding just because you've had a nagging knee for 3-4 weeks. It's better to get it. I always recommend to people, if you're unsure at all, if you have a medical health or a physical therapist or someone that or a provider who can easily give you an order or referral, get it checked out. I mean, the best case scenario is we say, hey, here's just a couple things, and to keep you active, versus coming in and be like, well, I have this, and then, oh, by the way, this hurts now, and now I have this side. Okay, well, we're looking at a good 2-3 months here to kind of get all this straightened out. And that's if the person's consistent. The sad statistics of physical therapy are that half people aren't compliant with their home programs. So we only give people. Yeah, I know. And then, and yes, there are some cases that are just not going to improve. I mean, I've seen some pretty tight hips, but it's the more we can address it. I'd be lying if I said I fixed everybody I saw.
I bet I have the tightest hips you've ever seen. I was born with my feet were twisted, and so my feet like pointed that way, and I wore braces the first 6 months of my life to like slowly turn them up. I cannot sit like crisscross applesauce. Like, you can take all your body weight and put them on my knees, and it's just locked.
Right. So, but then we take that into account, and we look for imbalances and things like that. But, even if it's just for a consult, like I said, I would rather, from me personally, have people come in with their questions, because I always tell people, I mean, no question is too dumb. I mean, if you think you're like, well, I can't do this, that's how we delve in. And that's where we really have to, the more information you can give somebody, the better they can make that diagnosis. And it's always tough to start. But if you wait, the longer you wait, the harder it is to start. And there's a lot of things that go into therapy, but I tell people to, I'll give you things to do, but this is really only 10 to 15% of your recovery is 10 to 15% what I do. You come to see me once or up to 3 times a week, whatever we decide is needed. You spend a lot more time on your own. So, even doctors, they can give you recommendations, but you still have to choose to follow those recommendations, and things like that. But it's just kind of taking those little kind of naggy things instead of waiting. Well, I've had pain for 2 years. It's like, okay, well, then it's good to get it checked out. And, sometimes, like I said, I've had people where it's like, okay, we can get them better. And people are like, wow, this just isn't progressing properly. I think you should go back or see the doctor. And it's like, oh, look, it's a tear, I always tell people my MRI vision doesn't work. So we kind of have to kind of figure it out as we go, sometimes. So
I think a lot of my audience, fortunately, that desire to go ride is the thing that's going to motivate you to stay on top of it and want to heal. Whereas, I don't want to talk crap about any of your clients or anything, but I'm guessing that there's a general
it is a
part of the
difference.
population where like you just don't have that motivation. It's like,
Correct.
I don't know, you take a pill or sit on your couch.
Right.
It's like, it doesn't hurt when I'm sitting down on my couch. So,
Right.
which is a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the other thing too is like people that ride a lot and it's like, oh, I just kind of got this nag that just isn't going away. But so I'm going to try, we try some of the stretches or a little bit of strengthening, and it's either going to get better, it's going to stay the same, or it's going to kind of get worse. But there, you kind of, how long do you wait? I mean, everybody's different. I personally don't like to be out of the saddle for too long. Kind of messes with my head. It's like, I just want to get back. And so I don't like to keep myself, so ask those questions, and it is hard because healthcare is expensive these days and limited in some access in areas and things like that. But there are resources, and things like that. But it's like, okay, well, I've tried this, I've tried that, well, then you should probably have it looked at, whether it's by some sort of MD or PA, and get a referral. I mean, I've had people I've seen and they're like, well, this just kind of hurts. I'm like, well, go to your primary care, because some insurances, and in some states it can be different state to state, where people could go directly to physical therapists. And it depends too, I mean, types of pain and things like that. But, I don't like people to mess around with stuff for a long time. I like to keep people moving. So, you're going to spend less money if you go in right away and get a few things to do it than wait 6 months and then you're there for 2 months.
Yeah. I mean, what I was thinking is if you're sitting on a $5,000 or $10,000 bike, give me a break, like your body, you get one body. I'm preaching to myself. Listen, I'm calling myself out because I waited until I was later in life, and now that I'm getting older, it's like I really want to be on top of my health, my sleeping, my nutrition, my fitness. Like I'm like, I want to use this body for a long time, and I need to start taking care of it now. I wish I started better 10 years ago, but yeah, like let's invest in our bodies. They are the vehicles. They are the most important thing. And if, we're sitting on some, we've talked about how expensive these sports can be. Like, I think we can siphon off a little bit of that money probably for our health and well-being. And ultimately, like we've kind of touched on, it really will at the end of the day equal like mental health, happiness. If you can do the things that you want to do and not live in pain, you're going to be a happier person, And so I think, it's just all the way around an important thing. Well, let's transition into some stretching then. I thought a good format for the stretching would be like, maybe you could show some like, daily / before, pre-ride stretches. Maybe like you pull over on the side of the road and you're in the middle of a 10-hour ride and you want to stretch out some things, and then some post-ride stretches. So I don't know if that'd be a good way to break it out.
Yeah, okay. We can definitely do a little bit of that. I do have my my gravel bike, so I'm going to show a little bit. So we're on the side of the road, some easy kind of ways to stretch some tight muscles at the bike. And then we can do some more static stuff for like at home. I can show you some of my favorite things that I like to do.
Yeah.
And then, and we can kind of go from there. So
let's do it.
Okay. So let's, I tried to clean it. The roads are really muddy around this time of year. So, so we just got off our bike and it's like, oh man, my back's a little sore. We spend a lot of time here, in that forward position. So, kind of even just bracing kind of our hips and just kind of arching back to kind of reverse that curve. This one gets a lot of people because we do spend a lot of time here seated and riding. And so it can be really, we really have to make sure you take your time and you're just kind of just slowly easing into that extension to just kind of, and I like to have people support their pelvis just so you can really kind of isolate right at that belt line. So, I mean, and people will do it, but my favorite kind of turn the bike to the side here, and so, yes, like I said, now on the we spend a lot of time here, but our hamstrings get really tight. So one of my favorite stretches during a ride, post ride, and I use this in the clinic all the time for shoulder patients, back patients, hip patients, is you start close to your bike, you kind of hold the bike, you walk your feet backwards. And as you do, you're sticking your tush out and you're just kind of leaning back this way. So we're getting our arms, we're getting our lats, our low back, glutes and hamstrings, and so your hips are back. If we're not here, we're not doing push-ups or planks. We're trying to, so you always got to kind of keep your feet forward and then your butt goes back. So then you can also, sometimes I'll have people from this side here, you bring your feet a little wider and you kind of come back, but then you go off, you can kind of switch sides, bend one knee to get a little bit more of our inner thigh. And it's just good to have something to balance on at our bike, because you think too, we're cycling a lot. There's a lot of, we're not riding with our knees out. So sometimes, if we're trying to get into the wind, we get a lot of tightness through our adductors trying to pull our bodies into that arrow position, so standing a little wider and to get that stretch through here is just really, really helpful. And you can do them, kind of just nice and slow, and things like that. One of my favorites is, I'm not quite sure which angle is you kind of stand, you're going to we'll do this foot, put your foot up kind of like in this figure 4 position. I'll do it with one hand, but you can also do it with 2. So, and then this is actually kind of a yoga position, but not everybody can balance like that. So having that bike kind of next to you or in front of you, but this one's really good because again, it gets that inner thigh and really kind of gets at some of those glutes and, piriformis, glute med, a lot of that kind of stuff, also challenging that single leg balance. And then you can
are these more dynamic where you're like,
so this would be more, this is a static
okay,
kind of stretch.
You're moving into a static position and you're holding it for 20 to 30 seconds.
Yep. And you just kind of would hold as you can, you kind of balance and stabilize here. And it's actually a pretty stable position because your nose is forward and your butt is back. So my center of gravity is still pretty well located. But yes, these particular stretches you probably want to hold for a longer period of time because again, we're doing them post-ride. And so that's when we want to get into that, this position and just kind of exhale and allow our bodies to kind of stretch. You can squeeze your butt cheeks, kind of do a little bit of that almost cat-cow position, so you're arching through your back and then you arch down, kind of get a little bit of your pelvic, that pelvic rotation as well.
Yeah, that's yoga. I know what that is.
Yeah. And well, like we talked earlier too, that yoga, all of these positions are very important. You're here and you want to add a little more. Well, just bring your hands down a little bit more to isolate your hamstrings. So hamstrings get tight, calves get tight. Some people can't always touch the floor. That's why it's nice to add the arms in this way. I can still feel it the same in my hamstrings, but I'm still also getting my shoulders and my lats a little stretched out too, because I've been riding all day with them right here.
Yeah, I think that's great to open up the arms like that as a cyclist because you're just, stretching it out.
And even, kind of this stuff, where you have your arms, or bring your arms up and you just kind of squeeze down and back because again, our pecs, we're here. And so how do we, reaching back to open up the chest in the opposite direction? We're kind of just pulling our elbows down to stretch through that rotation, kind of finding that way to do that. And then, leaning to your calf, that calf stretch because our calves do get tight. With the knee straight, we'll get the gastroc and then we bring it in and we bend both knees to get a little more at the soleus. So
weird. What was that move you did there? Were you squatted?
This is the standard, your gastroc stretch, okay? Because your gastroc muscle crosses your ankle and your knee, but there's a muscle underneath it called your soleus, which does not cross your knee. So we bend the knee to put the gastroc on slack and just stretch the deeper muscle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never seen that one.
Yeah, it's often a forgotten muscle, because everybody's like, oh yeah, I stand and I put my feet up on my curb or on my pedal. That's kind of another way to get that calf stretched. So those are important. Then you have your very, your simple standing quad stretch, to really, because now with this one, I'm going to show it from the side too. if your knees allow, it's not a here, oh, I don't feel it. Well, you kind of got to tuck your tailbone or squeeze your butt cheeks to tuck your tailbone straight down at the ground, because what that's going to do is help you get a little bit more into the deep hip flexors at the inside of your pelvis. So that's a good one. And then you can also, to get back into those pelvis muscles, kind of in that calf stretch position. But now I'm going to squeeze my butt cheeks, point my tailbone down, and now I can feel it even more stretch through the front of the hip. If I want more, here again, and now we really kind of reaching up, turning away. So from the front, we're here to really open up those hips.
Okay.
Because as cyclists, we spend a lot of time here. And so the muscles just get really, really tight. So those are kind of some easier or beneficial ways. And for balance, you use your bike. Yes, many people can probably do them without their bike, but, just kind of nice little quick, easy ones to reverse that, because it's like, well, hey, I got 140 miles I'm going to do. How do I keep myself pedaling that far? Okay.
Perfect.
So that's with the bike. And now we'll look at, move my computer back a little bit further. We'll do, I got to grab my foam roller.
Oh yeah. Bring out the foam roller. I have a foam roller. I don't know how to use it. Well, yeah, I really don't know exactly what I'm supposed to be doing with it, but everything I do hurts. I know that.
Well, so foam rollers are awesome for moving fluid. I will tell you, the first time I rolled my quads, I had tears in my eyes. They hurt so bad. But I tell you, I don't cry anymore.
Good.
So I will show you a couple of mine favorites that I use, like post ride, and things like that. The other fun thing about the foam roller is you do a lot of eccentric strengthening. So it actually is really kind of good for your core and like your triceps, because you have to hold your body up. So just sort of my other little plug. Okay. So, we're here. I mean,
real quick, I know that it's eccentric and concentric, but I don't remember what those two mean. And so for other people out there that forgot, can you remind me?
Yeah, sorry. So they're the two different types of muscle contractions. Concentric is like our power phase. It's the shortening of a muscle. So like when we jump, that's that power that they go up the stairs, our quads get shorter to help push us up the stairs. Whereas eccentric is a controlled lengthening of the muscle. Mm-hmm. So when we come down the stairs, the muscles have to get longer in a controlled fashion so we don't fall down, because we're fighting gravity. And so that's where a lot of times people are like, well, I have more pain in my knees going down the stairs. Well, one, because of the mechanics of it, it's a lot more force on the kneecap. But if we don't have the strength to control that lengthening, we're going to have pain.
All right.
So, but now let's take this position here. My triceps are going to work to kind of hold. So we're going to roll our hamstrings. Mm-hmm. And this is where you get a little bit of core work too. So, because you're pushing forward all the way to your sit bone, and then you're rolling back, but my butt's hovering about an inch or so off the ground, but you need that core to kind of keep it there. And so I tend to kind of show you a little bit about what my favorite muscle groups to do after a ride. Hamstrings, obviously, slide it down towards or below my knee, down or towards the ankle. You get your calves. Now, the fun thing with the calves is you don't have to do it with just your toes up. If you turn to the side, you'll find you can get a little bit of the muscles on the outside of your lower leg, and then you can kind of roll them to the inside and you'll notice it'll feel different. Uh-huh. Okay. Then also, so let's think of the ones here on your back. So those, and then kind of getting at your glutes, you can get in that figure 4 posture and kind of roll right across. You got a lot of muscles in your hips that do a lot of different things. You can kind of roll side to side. And this also helps you just kind of go find those sorenesses or sore spots. The only thing that I don't ever recommend people do is put the roller underneath their lumbar spine at their belt and arch backwards. It's just not the most healthy thing for our spine.
Now, I mean, you did say that I think, teared up the first time you tried this. My experience with foam rollers are that they're fairly painful. Can you articulate like what level of pain is acceptable here?
It's kind of a tolerate. I kind of was like, well, I know I have to do this, so I'm going to do it. There are different densities of rollers that you can get. So some that are softer. I don't know how people can use the hard plastic ones with the knobs and bumps all over the place.
God,
I find my body, and some of it's just some bodies are more sensitive to different rolling and things like that. So like, let's take like the IT band for saying, people all say, okay, well, we'll roll on it. Well, okay, I can go this far and it doesn't hurt. Okay, then just go that far. Even with your stretching, start small. And then as you find you're creating that deformation and that stretching in the tissue, well, now I can go a little further and it doesn't hurt. When my quads are really, or my muscles are really sore, there's a lot more lactic acid built up in them. So yeah, they're gonna hurt more because I'm basically trying to force that fluid out.
Okay.
If you can't tolerate the foam roller, I recommend people take like a rolling pin and start there, because then you can grade how much pressure you apply to those muscles.
Plus, I think it's good information that there's different, like there's softer and harder ones, which I didn't realize. So that's probably good for people to know.
You go and just the density sometimes like, oh, I like this color. Well, the colors mean different things with different brands. So like this one here, you can do your quads, and here too, you do them with your knees kind of pointing out to get a little more on the inside. Do the tops because you got 4 muscles in there to get, so you kind of have to play around with that position. You can do a knee straight with the muscle a little more slack. You bend your knee, you're putting a little more stretch through some of those muscles that might feel a little bit different. And then our anterior tib. So we kind of get down. So we're at our ankle or our knees, either one, and you just kind of roll in to get the muscles on the front of the shin, which isn't as big of a deal. I don't find as much soreness there with cycling as I do with, per se, running.
Yeah, running, I could see that. But
and then
we got a lot of hike bikes sometimes in some of these bike packing events, so you never know.
I know. So that's what I'm nervous about, because I don't like to get off my bike.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be a new experience.
It just depends on if you're doing like some gnarly single track or not. But
it should be an adventure. So I'll show you one more stretch that there's a couple more, but so I like to put it at my sacrum, and I like to, gotta hug one leg, and so this really gets deep into those hip flexors. And this one you just kind of, I always think of like lengthening the leg, and then you just slowly kind of switch. And just
now, what is your sacrum? Breathing. Is that your tailbone?
So your tailbone, your sacrum is right between your hip bones. So if you find your belt and then you come down a little bit, it's the bone between your pelvis bones. Okay. It's a solid one. You don't want to put it at that belt line. You have, that part of your spine is very mobile. Yeah. So the sacrum, kind of right above your sit bone. I feel is kind of where we're at. Okay. I feel with that. And then the other one, a little more tricky to do, but, kind of getting at that inner thigh. Cause again, we're constantly pulling our knees in. Okay. So those are kind of the fun ones. Other important static stretches that I have on my list that I think, we've kind of talked a little bit. This one's a little more dynamic, but for people that aren't as familiar with kind of that cat cow, where you kind of drop your pelvis and then you really arch up through your whole back. Oh yeah. And then coming down.
That one feels so good.
Yeah. So kind of getting, you put one leg kind of across, kind of take, and you can kind of rotate. It's hard to pick a side here. I'm going to kind of hold here, and I'm going to rotate. So I'm getting my trunk, a little bit of my TFL, glutes, kind of just trying to get that rotational stretch, to stretch through your hip. Other good ones, we recommend, kind of that extension, going from a prone on elbows, because some people's backs are not going to be as mobile as mine, and mine is not as mobile as other people's. So sometimes even just resting on your elbows and trying to let your back just relax into that position. If that's like, well, I don't feel anything, well, then you kind of come into that, what's called the cobra pose. Now, and I'm a little stiff, so I am, it's really kind of hard for me to come all the way up.
Well, you got to warm up. You got to warm up.
I know, we've been sitting here too long. But no, in general, when I do this, it just doesn't, that's my own fault. But yeah, just kind of giving it a little more, kind of easing up, and you kind of can grade how much pressure you put. But this, does get at that hip flexor, but also that reverse curve there.
Yeah.
I know, like I said, this is, that child's pose, sometimes people do the cobra and that's a good stretch, but then they like to go right into kind of that child's pose.
Yeah.
Where you sit back, and you can kind of walk your hands one way to kind of get, or go the other way to really kind of get more through here, and just kind of add a little bit different stretch to some of those. If you're already on the floor, an easy kind of hamstring stretch is just here, or holding it, sometimes it's here. And I had somebody the other day who was here, believe it or not, so, coming up.
I can't believe it, because that's about where I'm at.
Yeah. So just kind of coming up to that gentle hold. Sometimes people will use a belt or a strap around the foot,
right,
to give you a little more pull there.
I found that for me, that's extremely helpful, that strap or rope. I like that.
Yeah. So, because then that will allow you,
yeah, I'm so not flexible, so I use all the aids.
Right. So then you can kind of keep your knee straight, and you can kind of pull to kind of wherever you need to. And it allows, and the goal is to allow the leg to be relaxed. If you're up there and it's just shaking like crazy, it means you're holding and you're not relaxing, so trying to get, especially with this one, people are like, oh, and I'm like, okay, nope, you got to try to relax again, relaxing into those stretches. Yep. And then last, another kind of easy calf stretch. And for this, and then you can bend the knee as well.
Oh, I've never seen that one either.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
This is one I recently found. And I found it when I had a student, and, it's for adductors, but also for pelvic floor. And I said, oh, I just found this new stretch, and I was all excited about it. And I showed it to her. She goes, oh yeah, I know that one. And I was like, oh, thanks for bursting my bubble. But, we get a lot of inside knee pain from tightness through here. And so we're kind of here, and we're just going to kind of sit back into that stretch. So that's what it looks like from the front, and kind of come up. But if we're from the side, so I'm here on all fours, and I'm just going to kind of sit back to really feel that pull through that inner thigh.
It's almost like a child's pose with your leg extended out to the side.
Yep, but it's really going to target those adductors and that pelvic
instead of
floor.
The back.
Yeah. Strong and healthy pelvic floor allows us to hold our pee longer on the cycling. Really? That's my own claim. I don't know. I just made that up. But it does. Strong pelvic floor helps with
makes sense.
All that kind of stuff. So, and then one of the favorite piriformis stretches is this figure 4. So you're here and you're kind of coming up. Some people like to hug their knees. We're sometimes taking that knee and drawing it towards the opposite shoulder. Like I said, we have a lot of glute muscles, and some do one rotation and some do another rotation. So we have to really play around with that position, and make sure we're not getting too much tightness in the front or pinching in the front. But awesome. So I know we went through those kind of quickly, but that's kind of the big major muscle groups that we want to target from like a cycling standpoint.
I can't wait. I'm going to go try them as soon as we get off here. I'm like, I've been waiting for this all day long. I'm like, I'm ready to do some stretching.
Yeah. And like I said, foam roll, I love my foam roller and, that kind of stuff. And just, you get in and, here too, we talked about chest expansion, kind of doing a thoracic. So here I'm at about my shoulder blade level, that kind of stuff. A lot of people like it when our necks get really stiff, get it right at the base of your skull and going side to side, to kind of get at some of those. The other one I use most frequently. So I have, again, my tail all the way to my head and just doing snow angels to really stretch all the way through all of these muscles and gets at my pecs as well.
Yeah.
Usually kind of crunches the first few times I do it, but it's a cool tool to use. And a lot of people have them and don't know how to use them or don't use them. So,
Yeah, that's been me. I'm excited to go try some. Actually, I know it's going to hurt, but I'm excited by how good I'm going to feel afterwards.
Well, right. I mean, I even just in this little bit, I can tell I've been sitting more today or things like that, and just how much looser, and we're moving fluids. This sounds goofy, but I noticed personally the appearance of like cellulite, it gets that real dimply kind of thing. Well, when we keep the fluid from building up in our tissues, it doesn't appear as much. And it changes it, and it's a toning in a sense, because we're just moving excessive fluids throughout our body, and just, trying to keep things mobile.
Sweet. I'm excited to go give it a shot. Awesome. I'm really happy. We covered everything that I wanted to cover. I think this has been like great information. I've learned a lot, and I really appreciate it. Is there anything that you wanted to touch on that we didn't before you go stretch your vocal cords?
No, I mean, the only thing we didn't go through really is kind of some of the strength stuff, but that's pretty easy. And if if it comes up in a different one, you can always plug it into something else too.
I feel like the strength one, like, I don't know. I know there's right ways to do every workout,
there are,
right?
And to be honest, when you do a Google search, you can find videos and all kinds of stuff, and all of the stuff that I've looked through, because I do, it's like, what are people seeing out there? And a lot of it is very well done. So that's definitely something that's the thing is I feel easy to do.
Yeah. I kind of agree. I wanted to focus on the stretching because like I said at the beginning, I'll watch a million YouTube videos on how to do the workout and the exercise right. But whenever it comes to stretching, it's overlooked. And I feel like that's probably the area where and you said the same thing. They always skip stretching. And so it's like, I feel like that's the thing that most people are missing out on.
I do agree big time. And just not with cycling, but with many, just our lifestyles. It's like, if we can cut corners somewhere, we're going to, stretching from a workout is usually what happens. But again, it's, we have to pick why we're cutting those corners. I looked at it this way a number of years ago. This is why I got rid of cable, because I just like, okay, I just spent 10 minutes and I'm not watching anything, and I've just surfed through every single channel twice. I could have done 10 minutes of stretching instead of sitting here on the couch. So sometimes it's about making those choices to find those 10 minutes or 5 minutes to plug it into our day, and do it, so, and then the big point too, with like I said, with the strength, is really challenging more single leg stuff, single leg squats, single leg deadlift, single leg, I have an 18-inch, on the side, 18-inch step, just that, taking that weight and just coming up, just all that kind of single leg stuff is just uber important.
Yeah. And start slow when you are weight training, and especially if you're old like me. But just start slow. Honestly, like you said, it's all the stretching, all the exercises, and even bike packing in general. Like, don't bite off a whole bunch. Like, start small, Right.
And ask for help. Most, if you're at a gym, there's usually a trainer. And unless you're at some gym where you can't talk to the trainer unless you pay for them, most of them are willing to answer questions here or there, because they don't want to see you get hurt.
Yeah.
And a good trainer, if they don't know the answer, they'll find it for you. So
awesome. Well, I appreciate it, Maria. I think this has been wonderful. I'm excited to get this out to everybody. And we'll leave your contact information in the show notes. So if people do want to reach out to you, and you're in the Wausau, Wisconsin area.
It's Wausau.
Oh my gosh, I did it again. Fuck. I know.
I was like, where the heck is Wausau?
Y'all are going to murder me the next time I come visit. It's Wausau, people. Get it right. Oh, my God. Anyway, my bad. Yes, that's correct. Obviously. Everybody knows that. But I'm maybe going to be up there in this fall for the Midwest Bikepacking Summit. So
that's a kid weekend for me, but we were hoping to kind of take part in that at some point. But if it's okay, can I give you my work email instead of my personal one?
Oh, of course.
To put in there. I would rather they use that. And then I can put all my professional signature. Do you want me to just tell it to you, or do you want me to email it to you?
Just send it to me.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll put it in the show notes for anyone who wants to follow up with you and maybe come see you in Wausau. And
I'm in Wisconsin Rapids, not Woosah.
Oh, you are?
I'm in Wisconsin Rapids. Yeah. So Wausau is about an hour north, but there are wonderful clinics throughout our area and things like that. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mary. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Have fun singing.
Oh, I will. All right. All right. Yep. I'll send that to you. Maybe not now, but a little later. So.
Oh, yeah. Sounds good. No rush. All right. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope you found it fun, informative, and helpful, or at least 2 out of those 3. 2 out of 3 is good, I think, right? All right, everyone. Like I mentioned at the beginning of today's episode, I've already started to put into practice mostly the stretching and the warm-up practices that we discussed in today's episode. And I can already tell you that it has made a world of difference. I have been dealing with injury after injury after injury, it feels like, in the past year. Nothing major, but it's just been like one nagging thing after another. And it really started to kind of bum me out. Partly because I realized, I guess I'm getting a little bit older and now I got to deal with this kind of crap, which sucks. I don't want to deal with it, but life is life, and here we go. So the good news is there's something I can do about it. I can stretch, I can warm up, I can do yoga, and I can start slow. And so when I've been hitting the weights, I'm doing a good full stretch and getting nice and loose, and I'm warming up slowly, starting with very low weight and moving up from there. And I genuinely can tell a huge difference in just how I feel, how much stronger I feel. And it's not just about strength, but it's about feeling strong because I don't have these like nagging parts of my joints and my shoulder and my elbow and stuff that are like, hey, I'm not ready. That's what my body's been telling me. I'm not ready. And my brain is like, yeah, you are. We're going to do it anyway. Tough it up. But apparently it doesn't work too well, at least whenever you get into your 40s, or at least for me. So anyway, again, thank you to Maria. I have personally benefited already from the information that we discussed in this episode, and I think that you will too if you give it a shot. And I think that's about it for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you appreciate these episodes, maybe consider supporting this show over at patreon.com/bikesor death. And of course, another great way to support this work is to leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast, and maybe tell a friend. Until next week, you know what to do. Go ride your damn bike.